Hey everybody, it's Sunday, June 18th, and it's Tinderbox Meetup. It's Tinderbox Meetup with Michael Becker. I'm Mark Bernstein, Tinderbox developer, and here is Michael Becker.
Hey everybody, welcome to our meetup and happy Father's Day to those that are inclined in that area. At one point or another, there was a father somewhere in your life, so happy Father's Day. Exciting to be with you all today. So typical Tinderbox fashion, we go around the room, new people introduce themselves, we talk about our projects we're working on, and then we dig into themes. Now we have a super small group, as you can see today. So no new people, and we have no theme for the week. So what I was hoping to do is maybe share one of my topics or ideas, and then we could walk through, unless Mr. Rogers, Mr. Anderson, or Mr. Bernstein or David have some other ideas in mind.
Sure. I want to throw out a possible project just as something that we might like to do on the forum.
Okay.
I made up a Tinderbox trip planning document in earnest for the first time in a few years this week. And it's, your usual scenario of a little bit of work and altogether too much play. But it seems to me that that's kind of a fun topic, and one which is not likely to get too tied up in an automation immediately.
I love that idea. So we
I
can
guess, what's the topic, Mark?
Tinderbox at trip planning in Tinderbox.
Trip plan. Oh, okay.
Are you using posters for Airbnb listings?
Haven't gotten anywhere near that far. We're three people. We're trying to negotiate dates. There are serious health challenges, so that's got to be taken into account. And of course, but things like reading lists and yes, the vacation assigns homework.
List of chargers.
That sounds totally awesome. So, and then the topic I was hoping to propose, and let's definitely go and dig into that. So Mark, do you have a demo file for us to walk through today on that?
No, not at this point.
Okay, so it's not a topic for today. It's a topic for later. Got it. So let's definitely 100% do that. On the topic of future ideas, on that note, I have a friend of mine I spoke to this morning who is writing a book on kind of what an AI infused future will look like in terms for society and its implications on jobs and politics and where we end up. And he'll want to be a guest speaker for us in a few weeks because he's got some really interesting thoughts and ideas on that. And the great thing about it is I only agree with about half of what he's talking about, so it will be super helpful to have that dialogue. So what I wanted to talk about, and I was thinking about proposing for today, and by the way, I have a hard stop at 10 o'clock. So if one of you guys can take over after 10, that would be great. I would love to be able to, the problem I want to tackle is I have this ability to have Tinderbox create automatic linking for me. So I populate an attribute, and then Tinderbox automatically links those notes to my creates the note that I've populated in the attribute. So I'll have a term, we'll call it, learning management. And Tinderbox will automatically then create a note for me called learning management and link that note to this item. Where I'm struggling with is finding out the most efficient logic for when I remove an attribute from an item from the attribute list, that I can then have Tinderbox automatically unlink that note. And so I would, if we don't mind, I'd love to go through the eachLink operator and walk through that scenario of we've got this link, here is this link to this note, let's now go through the operation of unlinking that note based on values that are in an attribute. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to set that up and we could go through that demo if you're all up for that. Okay, so it seems like we have a quorum there. Oops, yep. I want to share that screen. I want to share this screen. So we'll go over here, got a screen, and let me pop up a Tinderbox file here. All right. So let me go ahead and kind of get this started. All right, so let's say I'll start it with a blank Tinderbox file, and I think, let me pull up aTbref real quick as well, so we can see it. So I think the answer is somewhere in the links.operator or the aTbref. So if we go to eachLink. Oh, while I'm at it too, Mark, let me just show you this because I was bringing this to you yesterday. So if I go to Tinderbox file, this is the link I'm referring to, Mark. When I click on that, the source file is not downloading.
It's weird because it works here. I'm just wondering if somehow you've managed to persuade your browser that the site is not to be trusted, because when you first use a download from a link.
Well, I can download it from here. It works there.
Okay.
But it doesn't work on the homepage. Let's not go through it now, but I just wanted to
the problem, I mean, I did try it and it does work on my homepage. So I've genuinely no idea. So I don't think the HTML is broken.
Got it. Okay. So I just wanted to demonstrate it to you. So there's an operator here in Tinderbox called eachLink. What this operator allows you to do is go and interrogate eachLink. And for this exercise, I thought it would be fun to kind of play with this a little bit. So I'm going to come back to this in just a minute, but let me get it set up so we have it. So I have a file here, and let's go ahead and add in our hints, and let's add in some prototypes. And we'll go hit the outline because that's easier. I don't need a person prototype. We'll call this P note. And we'll add in the on add just to make it easy. Equals P note.
Okay. You're missing a Y on the prototype. An E on the end of the
prototype. Yeah. And then what we want to add to the prototype is we'll say term. And we'll make that a set. Okay, and then I'm going to go up here. We'll call this notes. But you know what? I didn't want to do it here. I want to do it here. And all right, so we've got our environments almost set up. Okay, and so then what I want to do is I have some action code that I've created for myself. Down here, libraries. And so what this action code does here is this takes in inputs from a note and then allows me to automatically create a note from an attribute and such. And there's some new optimizations with the action attributes that we don't necessarily need to use eval that we can talk about later. But for now, this works. And then if I go here, what I'm going to do is pull in an example here. So now if I click on my prototype that I created here and I paste this in. So what this is essentially doing is saying, call the function, create and link a note with prefix, and look at these different values that I'm going to pass to the function, and then the function will create that note. So now if I go up here and we'll say, I don't know, this is the note. Okay. And I type in the word, I don't know, let's just type in the word Tinderbox. Right. So now what will happen is you'll see that the function automatically created a folder called resource folder, automatically created a subfolder called terms, and automatically created me a note called terms Tinderbox. So all of that is being generated by this note. So let's go ahead and add a couple more notes here. Let's call this one learning management, note taking. Okay, three is good. And you'll see Tinderbox has automatically created those three, and that's great. So now let's say I want to go ahead and delete Tinderbox from this note. And if you look here at number 7, you'll see that this note has all three of those new notes that we just created linked to this. But now what I want to do is I want to create a new function called unlink note. Function unlink note. Say function like that. So that sets us up. And what I want to do now is create a function that's in here that looks at the values that are in the term attribute. And if those values don't exist, unlink them from that. And eventually too, I'm going to want to modify this so that like I have other attributes, as you all know, like entities or regulations. So it'll be reg hyphen and ent hyphen. And so we'll play with that context later. But essentially what I need to do is figure out a strategy or a way for Tinderbox to look at the attribute term and then unlink a term that is not currently associated with that note. So let's go through that exercise. And I played with certain thoughts and ideas on this. And so the couple things that I think I know I need to know is what values are currently in the terms folder and what notes are currently linked. And then I need to do some kind of calculate a set of the notes that are linked with the set of the items that are in this in the existing attribute, find the one that's missing or the ones that are missing, and then have Tinderbox delete the notes that are missing. So that's the operation I need to go through. And so I want to then pause there. And Mark Anderson's nodding his head saying, yeah, that generally sounds right. So let's pause there. How would I start with this?
What you saw the reply to you in the forum about how you get a name from
I did not. So let's look at that.
So you'd ask, I said, if I say, you know, what is the source of this note? I get back the path, but I want the name.
Correct.
So in fact, if you just say name brackets and the loop variable with the key source.
All right.
Here's
the question I posted up in the forum.
Yeah.
Right.
So that will get your list of names. So you now have, if you pass that into, you can put that, you see, you have a story, you can put that in the set variable. So you got one set.
So let's put this in as a stamp right now, just so we can test. We'll say get source. Okay, and since we're exercising, I'll fix the typo in a minute. Since we're exercising this, people can see it. So there's source, and this returns a path of the source object, and that's what we're learning in Tinderbox here. And the way to do that is to do like that, this method here. So when
and on the thread, as Mark sort of lifted the curtain earlier, is that there will be nicer ways to do this directly using ID or an ID string. So for those using lots and lots of code who might be worried about having parentheses or slashes in note names, and you just want to use you basically want to go direct to a unique identifier, the next release will have some more keys in each link. But as it stands, what you'll do is what you're doing here. So you go and get, that's it. So you've got that, and what you want is if you after the equal sign.
Okay.
After the in the loop, after the plus equal sign, type after the equal sign, type $name, open parentheses, and then after the closing square bracket, put a closing parenthesis, then run your stamp, and you should get.
Beautiful. All right.
Okay.
Now, if you don't mind, let's do this. Just since we're in an exercise.
Yep.
For those that are listening to this. Oops, whoops, I screwed that up. And because it auto saved, I screwed that up. So let me go here. I'll paste that back in. So there's the original one, and I got to put the variable back in. Variable string. Link notes, and I'll say. And this is just for testing purposes, so it's fine. Okay, so that is that. What I want to do is move this one up. Like that. Say that one's 2, this one's 2. And then let's explain. And again, since this is an educational thing, I understand what's happening, but those that are here may not. So let's explain what this is.
So
hang on real quick. So the first thing I wanted to show people is like, so if I'm here and I've selected this note, if I use the first one without that, this is what I was experiencing. So it's returning the path, right? So, and if you go back to aTbref, it's doing exactly what it's telling you to do. If you ask it to pass the source element, it's saying path of the source object. So what Tinderbox, what that's doing is it's giving me the path of the source object, and the source object are these 3 linked notes. And so by typing in this one, then we're saying grab the name attribute for the operation that is this, which means get that note. And so when I do, and because this is returning the actual note. And then when we do that, we actually get the names of the notes. So that solved a massive problem I was experiencing last night. Okay.
And there is a sort of on the end of the forum thread you showed that I sort of delved into the fact that if you get to the point where you've done sort of an offset reference, i.e., dollar attribute name parentheses, and you put something inside, basically it's expecting either a literal name/path, or an ID or an ID string or a designator. If you put something else in, or you wanted something like the loop variable, but not quite the loop variable because you want to do something else, you might need to unpack that into a variable. If you wanted, the example I think I gave is you wanted actually not the thing it was linked to, but the next sibling. I mean, it's a silly example, really.
Like right here.
You want that. But the point being that you can do that. The main thing is that, so if you don't get what you expect, it's possibly you're trying to do too much inside those set of parentheses, and then you're good to go. Now, of course, where you've got to is not where you want to be, because your list of terms doesn't have the TRM
prefix
on the front. So now what you want to do is this list that you've put into text. What you want to do is you want to remove. So you want to reject that's caret, i.e. beginning of string, capital T RM hyphen space, and you want to replace that with nothing. So that you're
or pause there. Do I? Because here's the other thing, and the way I work my files is I'm going to have, to the extent these will always be unique note names.
Yeah.
So the other thing I can do is grab this list, add the prefix to each one of these.
Well, it's 6 and 2 3s.
Right. It's 2 ways to do it, right? And then I say
what you really want to do is you want to have 2 sets, so there are no dupes, and then you subtract one set from the other, which leaves you all the things that, in other words, because what we're expecting is that this is right. Yeah.
So what I would do is something like this. I was thinking of doing this. So variable set b set, right? And then I'd say term.each x v set plus plus equals term space plus x. So if I do that, I've now got and we'll go ahead and make text equals this just to make it easy. Text equals v set. Right. So with that stamp, what I'm now essentially saying is, hey, Tinderbox, go grab all of the values that are currently in the term attribute and make that into text. So now I've got a set that says term learning management and term note taking. And if we go back here and fix this one, we can delete that. Like that. And that should give me, let's make it a set as well. And then, so this now should give me a set of the notes that are linked. And so now I've got 2 sets. I have a set of the names of the notes that are linked to this note. And I have a set of the names of the notes that are here. And so then now I just need to create a stamp that says the unlink stamp, unlink operation. And what we need to do now here is we need to find the v set v unlink. So that's going to be the set of notes that I want to be able to unlink, correct?
Yeah. And now, so now what you want is all the things that are in the local set, but not in the master set.
Correct.
In fact, you've got the 2 sets. So you want to subtract one from the other, because one will have more than the other. And it doesn't matter which way you do it, you're going to end up with the residue, which in this case is going to be, I think, term Tinderbox, or whichever it was,
Right.
that wasn't linked, or which isn't in the terms.
So if I go like this, so I've got my, there are my two sets.
Yeah. So if you now, what you can now do is you can set, you could just set text. If you want to check it, you can set text to be v term linked minus v set, which I think, if we're lucky, should give you one item.
It should give us Tinderbox.
Yeah.
V term. So what we want is v term
minus v set. So it's one thing minus the other.
Yeah.
And Tinderbox knows it's set type data, and lo and behold.
And
so
now we say unlink.
Now, so now, of course, this could be itself. It's here. It's one item, but of course, it could be several. And you would want this to be, what you call this, make it into another set, because you might have several items, but it's supposed to be a unique list. So now you have a list. So where you've got your
so let's
text,
let's make this a so we've got the v unlinked variables.
V unlink. So v unlink equals v term, and now what you want to do is you want to iterate.
Yep.
V unlink, and for each item in v unlink, you want to unlink to or from. This is where I always get confused. One of the two. So the note you're in from the note named in the set. Yep.
Beautiful.
And that's and it's as simple as that.
It is as simple as that. So if we do that, so this is unlink 2.
I'm gonna have to look it up. I always forget, because you can, in your mind's eye, you can say it either way around and it makes absolute sense. So I shall check.
Just a minute. V unlink term Tinderbox. Did I spell unlink from? Unlink to? Yeah, let's look it up.
So unlink from removes all basic links from our note, from the note the notes we've specified. So you want unlink from v set to the current note. So
unlink from, let's just so people can see.
Yeah, sure. So
unlink from, and we're saying unlink from this.
So if you look at the very first, the second line of the second paragraph of the text above, this removes all basic links from scope, i.e. the scope, which is going to be v set. So that we want, and so in other words, this is remove inbound links from the notes we specify in the list, which in this case is a set, but it's a list, small l, to the current note, because we're removing inbound links. So we want unlink from, and we want
so unlink from. Did I spell it right?
Yes.
Unlink from.
Yeah, unlink from each. Well, that should work, I think.
It should.
Well, let's try. Joy of demos. I've probably missed something.
And it's not.
Okay.
So so let's do this practice though. So let's say unlink test, and we say unlink from term Tinderbox. And actually, we know this is the value, so that's the value. Do it that way, right? And then, and that's not working.
Just try the name of the note.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Don't you have to refer to the name of the note?
We are. The name of the note is term Tinderbox.
Oh, I'm looking up here at this is note. I thought that's where the result was.
We're saying unlink. So the context of the note is this is note, and we're saying we're applying the stamp to this is note, saying unlink from the note term Tinderbox.
So essentially,
isn't that intended to work with the term note instead of the this is note?
Well, just try 2. Just change the from to 2, because this is the thing that and it's this is not me casting aspersions at the operator. It's just it could be infernally difficult to figure out which one you're trying to talk
Yeah,
about.
and that doesn't seem to be working either.
And that hasn't worked too, because that should
work.
Should work.
And okay, let's try something real quick. Just play with this, right?
So the only thing we should be seeing is that little arrow to the left of the icon there should go away when the stamp runs, right? Showing no links into this is note.
Actually, what you should see is the little arrow from the
look, it just worked. It just worked. When I added in the type, it deleted.
Yeah.
So the universal unlink without a type seems to have an issue. But when I defined the type, it worked.
Yeah. Anyway, so there we go. So it works.
Okay, so let's do this now. So if I go here and I know my type, so if I say unlink from term X, in this case is I'm going to just hard code the term, and because I can
That could be a variable. Yeah,
that can be a variable, so we can play with that later. And let's go back up here and we'll add Tinderbox back in now. Okay, so that automatically created the code, and I'll come and let's play with it again. Let's also add Rome and Obsidian. This is going to be kind of a, so now what we want to do is, since we want to only keep the core concepts of really excessive learning management, we want to leave Tinderbox in and delete Rome and Obsidian.
Where's Tinderbox?
I deleted Tinderbox too. Oh, I put in the word term. That was it. Okay, so I've now got the notes, learning management, note taking, and Tinderbox, and that's all I really want. And I want all this other superfluous stuff, Rome, Obsidian, and term to be gone. He says chokingly, I'm not trying to be rude to Rome and Obsidian, but hey, we're just doing a demo. So if I do that, and I now apply this, and I know it's all links, and just make sure I got it right. There you go. Okay, and now we're only left with 3 notes. That's perfect. So now what we want to do is we want to take this and drop it equals F unlink note. All right. So there is our function. And again, we can come up with more unique names and all that. And since we have some time, let's also variabilize this thing term in just a minute. But so we've got our unique notes. Do I need
the first thing your function needs to know is which note it's dealing with, because to iterate each note, you need to, so you'll pass in an ID string if we're going to play by
that, or I just add it into the prototype. So if I go to this note's prototype, and I say function. All right, so I'm going to pass the unlink note function there. And so right now that would be iterating across any notes. And maybe what I can do is do something similar that I do here. And then I can pass it the term values. And I don't need the container, and I don't need the prototype. I do need the link type. And I want direction, because then that will give me the 2, but I don't really know it. Necessarily need to have that. So let's make it as simplistic as possible. So now what I'm saying is I'm going to pass to the unlink function the term variable and the link type. And so that's how that's happening up here in terms of inputs. So we can do the same thing, or I can just say be term and be type. Actually, our v attribute. So what we're doing is we're passing this to that, and so not a attribute, so v attribute. And so now, if we remove that, so for every item in v attribute, we're going to send this. And we know it's term now, so we'll hard code some of those in just a minute. And we know that this is going to be vTerm,
V type.
right? So in theory, that should work, and we can unhard code this prefix in just a minute. So if I go up here and I type in now, I don't know, give me a new term, galaxy. All right, so it's created galaxy. And now let's delete galaxy. All right, and that's not working because this note's rule has been lost its inheritance. So I can re-achieve its inheritance. So now we see that the rule actually has v unnote now too. And okay, so now that's not working. So what we want to do is we want to now see why this isn't working, where I'm passing in the attribute value and I'm passing in the type value.
It's a comma, not a semicolon there.
Got it.
Attributes have a comma between them.
Okay.
So arguments, should I say?
Yeah, argument 7. Okay, so that's still not working. So I'm passing in the attribute value and I'm passing in the type value. And I'm saying for every attribute value, iterate through that and create this set. And for each link on this particular note, we're doing this v-termed link.
You might want to say for your v attribute, you might want to just say put a colon after in the arguments at the top. No, in the arguments.
No, I'm just fixing this. It should be linked notes, not terms.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So your first argument is I think a list of notes, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the list of items in the.
Yeah. Okay. So make that so v attribute colon set. So at least give you just help Tinderbox to understand that the first argument
Up here,
whether it's got semicolon, because don't forget anything you don't type is a string.
Yeah.
So you actually, and it doesn't really matter if it's a string already, but hey, you filled it in. But the main thing is, I don't think this necessarily solves it, but it's useful to do because then we're not confused as to what the data type is.
Okay. So that's the correct way to do that?
Yep.
All right, so we're saying I'm sending you a set and I'm sending you a string.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just take a look here to make sure we've got it right. So if we go to the prototype. So we're sending in the attribute term and we're sending in the string. No, that's wrong. No, that's wrong. That's wrong. It should be type. No, the type. And we're sending a type we're calling term. So the type is going to be term. So the values I'm expecting it to be to send the function are all the items in the attribute that is term, and then the string term, which should set the idea. Yeah, Mr. Rogers, go ahead.
So very hard to follow what's going on. So for anybody who may be tuning in late, a couple things. What we're watching for on this is note is what takes place down in the bottom inbound links, correct?
Yeah. So what we're trying to do.
Okay, and what should we see happen?
So let's go back and look at it in the form of the stamp, right?
Okay, well, it's just all right. Two things. Okay, I should back up. First thing, show the viewer how you get the links view in this is note.
Got it. All right, and let me just fix this here. So that now our function and our stamp is going to be the same. Because now I want it to be generic. I don't want it to be just related to the terms folder. I want it to be jump. Okay, so when you're linking a note, let's go back from the very beginning, right? So if you have a Tinderbox file like this, very beginning, and I say note 1, and note 2, okay? And you can link a note to another note. You go like this. These two notes are now linked. Now I can visually see those links if I'm in map view. when I'm in outline view, if you see these little arrows, you can see that this note's linked to something and this note's linked to something. When you want to look at a note, you can go ahead and click browse links, and it will actually show you like note 1 is linked to note 2. And then I can spell note 1 properly. Right. And if I go to note 2 and right mouse click on note 2, browse links. Oh, that's funny.
No, because it's an inbound. Browse links only shows outbound links. not
Only
inbound.
outbound links. Okay, so note 2. Got it. Right. So I'm now looking at this. And so I can see that, that this is the notes that's linked to this note. Now, if you want to be able to view in the links pane, you hit Command 7, and that opens up this note. And I can now see in Command 7, here are the outbound links from note 1, and here are the inbound links from note 2. Right. So that kind of level sets to where we're at. Now, as I said in the very beginning of our exercise here, I had created some action code that automates that linking based on values that happen to be in an attributes, in the values that happen to be in a particular attribute. So I'll give you another example while we're at that too. So I'm going to create another attribute called entity, and it'll be a set. Okay, and this time I'm going to go to the note, and I'm going to say, I want it to be entity and entities. Each folder, BP entity. And it's going to be entity and a 2-link. All right, we're good to go. I'm going to go ahead and delete all of those. All right, so Tinderbox has automatically created the entity folder, and notice it's creating a value for me, which is funny. And the reason why I did that is the user generated attribute entity. I made an interval and not a set. So it actually had a value. Okay. There we go. I can go ahead and delete that now. And so let's say we create an entity now called escape. Another one called identity praxis. Okay. And so, and I've got to refix the inheritance again on this rule. There you go. And now Tinderbox has dutifully now created those 2 companies for me. And you'll notice here that it's now linked. Not only do I now have terms linked, I now have entities linked. Okay. And then typically, since those can be both terms, but let's go ahead and fix those, because really that should be something like this. Those are actually companies. Okay. And now I've got the companies Rome and Obsidian. So now, now you can see a sense from my work. So the reason why I do this is I want Tinderbox to automatically do the manual work that would leave me up to be able to do my thinking. And so I have Tinderbox creating term notes for me. I have Tinderbox creating entity notes for me. That way, when I'm in context of writing a particular note, I can go like this and say, well, note taking is all about blah, blah, blah. And then I can close it out. Now I've got a note, an atomic asset it created for me called note taking, which I then later can use, and I can pull into a glossary terms and do all these exciting things. I've got lists of companies that can create other types of indexes for me. So I can be now writing all this wonderful stuff. And now let's say in the context of this thing, I've now changed some of my thinking. I want to delete this note from it having its relationship with Obsidian and Rome. I still have the atomic assets that Tinderbox had created for me previously that I can later use in future projects. But what I want now and what we're trying to accomplish is I want Tinderbox to delete the links that are no longer associated with it through these attributes. And we've now done that for terms, the hard-coded type term. We've not done it now for entities because I'm now introduced this new prefix called entity. So we're going to be trying to figure that out. And likewise, where we're at now is we're trying to get the stamp that we created now to automatically work within a function.
So and again, this is closing the loop. When you speak to your audience, tell the audience when you apply the stamp, before you apply the stamp, what you expect to see, so we can tell it didn't work as quickly as you did.
Right. So let's go ahead and apply that stamp. And again, here's the other thing, because I changed some of the names of the variables, the stamp may not work now. But you'll see I've got this term galaxy here. But if you look up here, I don't have the term galaxy here because I deleted it. So when I apply this stamp, if I haven't screwed it up, and we'll be able to fix it in a minute, I expect because again, let's go back to the goal of the function. The function says create a note related to each one of these items that are in the attribute term and automatically link those created notes to this term. And if the note already exists, don't create it, just link it. Right? If I put and we'll go back to that in a minute. So now when I apply the stamp, what I'm expecting is the term galaxy to be removed from the linked list because it's not in this list and I want it removed. So when I apply that, and you see now galaxy is gone. And now if I go back up here, because the note galaxy already exists, right? I already previously had created that in some other thinking that I'd done on another project. I can now go like that. And am I going to get a crash? Might get a crash, and hopefully I didn't. Yeah.
No, you probably just need to let the code all run and update.
Yeah, it's pretty small, but I've got a bunch of other stuff going on
rule.
too. It looks like my Tinderbox file. Let me just force quit it. I don't know what I did wrong. And hopefully, and this is also demonstrates one of the beauties of Tinderbox. Is it auto saved it all for us? But let me go ahead and save this document. And let me duplicate it so I'll put it in somewhere else nice. All right, so then we'll just change its name.
So where we've rolled back to is just before you use the stamp.
Right.
You have the galaxy link and you don't have it in terms.
Right. Whoops. Hang on. I just hit the make it entire screen. When you have a 49-inch monitor, it just made it super big. Call this one. What do we want to name this file?
27.
And we'll put it on my desktop. So there it is. Ah. There it is. It just moved. Got it. Okay. So now we got it. So now what we're doing is we want to unlink galaxy with the stamp. You see galaxy is now gone. And if I type galaxy back in here, you'll see that it will automatically link galaxy back. Right. And note that what it did is it's not creating a new note galaxy for me because that note already exists. So it's now just now that this action code I have running will just relink it to that note. And then if we go back in here and delete galaxy again and apply the stamp.
Just to echo sort of Dave's observation, the thing that's making the links and making the terms is a function that we're not dealing with at the moment. That's
correct. Okay. That's a function I wrote before.
But just for the confused who are following, yeah.
This is a function I wrote before, right?
Yeah, sure.
You know, and it passes values into all that. We can explain that at another time. So now what we're trying to do though is to figure out how to make this unlink note function, this unlink note stamp actually work as a function. And so if we go like this, we get copy because we know it works as a stamp. So now we can go here and paste it here. Right. And now we want this working as a function. And it actually should And here we're and now what we're doing as a and before was a stamp. Now we're passing it the values, and the value we're passing it is the term value. So that should be term, and this should be type. And I would think if we've done it right, that should be and actually what we could do too, since we're doing that prefix idea, if I go back here, we should be able to also pass it this. Right? So that will be our prefix. So, and so in the context of, no, that won't work. That won't work. Okay, let's just do one step at a time. Let's say we're hard coding the fact that for now, we just want this to be deleting the terms. We'll deal with the prefix in just a minute. We want it to automatically delete notes that are unrelated terms. So if we go add Galaxy back in here, right, that is going to automatically link Galaxy as we should expect. But now if we delete Galaxy, it does not unlink that. And so I would expect that because I've got this unlinked, I'm passing the values of term and then passing the hard-coded type of term to the function. I would expect the function to be automatically delinking this note, and it's not. And so
what it's worth, I find when doing this, actually, so Mark is not here, but I find it sometimes just better to be explicit. When I'm using so when you're in a function, essentially when you reference an attribute, you are using you basically are referring to the attribute of the note that is calling the function. I find when it gets to things like eachLink, it seems to be clearer to say, in other words, tell the function for note X, ID whatever I want, and then when you do eachLink, you say for note each, for note X, do this. It just makes it the syntax allows it. Okay, you pass another argument, but it's just I haven't narrowed it down, but I think this may be possibly why this isn't working.
Okay, it is working now.
In other words, you're assuming quite rightly that each link is iterating the notes of the note called this is note. I have a hunch it isn't. And of course,
real quick though, I got it to do something. I defined the attributes, v attribute and v type.
Yeah.
Okay. Now what happens? You'll see the notes are linked, and now it's automatically deleting every link.
Well, yes. So now you have a different error.
Right. And let's just have it delete. Let's just and maybe it's the type thing.
No, the other thing I've sort of
no, look, that's deleting now every term link.
Yeah.
And not just the one.
Well, what is X? So what is v unlink?
V unlink is this set here, all linked notes.
Yeah, no. What I mean is now this is a point where you do a little logging and you record what you think v unlink should be, but it's clearly not what you thought it is. So it appears to be everything.
It appears to be all term notes. And it is, so linked v notes equals plus equals. So all the linked notes minus.
So I'm guessing that this would be consistent with each link not reading the note you think it is, because v set, in other words, it's just deleting all the term notes.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, get it working for one prefix, and then you can go back to doing terms and entities. That's easier because you just add more code with care, but you build off it. So to ensure that each link is reading what you think it is, if you pass the ID string of the note that we, i.e. if this is note as an argument into the function, and then for each link there is a syntax version that allows you to say what, I'm just looking it up, each link, not rely on memory, always a bad thing. If you're, so basically when you've added the ID string,
Oh, you know what? Okay.
yeah, if you go back to the
Oh,
function
you know what?
now,
I think I did it wrong because I'm using a wrong syntax. So if this should be, I should be passing it term and how about this?
do you want a comma? No. Oh yeah, you do. Yes, if you're passing it to function, the arguments must be
So
comma
I'm
delivered.
passing this and that. Yeah. So let's see. All right. So that's still not working. That's still good. All right. Okay. So I've got to go in 9 minutes, by the way. So what we can do is let me wrap this up and I will send this to Mark Anderson and you can drive.
Yeah, I guess so.
Unless people want to continue on with this conversation, we can move to something else if people don't want to finish this and we can finish it next week.
Well, the thing is, actually doing this in real time probably doesn't help. It's just a matter of you know, in a sense of running out some errors in the code,
Yeah.
Which are probably not illuminating to watch. If I mean, you know, the point is we sort of know what the endpoint is. We know it's fixable.
Yeah.
And Chuck has a hand up.
Mr. Chuck.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think this has been a very useful exercise. I do think it's the kind of thing that I personally would like to play with myself, so that I can really get a good handle on how these various functions. I have not done unlinking before, and you know, so if this could be provided as you have it here, or as it gets subsequently modified, I think would be a very useful exercise tool or sample tool for myself and others to look at and gain familiarity with these new features. So I think this has been very helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that's the intention, right? I figured let's once in one of these community meetings solve my problem and then we'll benefit everybody else's. Yeah. That's good.
I mean, all I would say, yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I was just suggesting probably finding the last missing bit. It looks like some scoping issue. And what makes it hard, of course, and this goes back to the general debugging thing, is that we've got another function that's providing all sorts of parameterized set information. I mean, normally what I do is something like this. If it doesn't work, then I roll all the way back and I take out all the parameters and I just hard code the whole thing until I'm confident that it works, soup to nuts. And then you just start feeding the parameters back in. I mean, it's obvious once you know how. It's always a pain because you thought you get it right without having to, but you know, sometimes you get it right and sometimes you don't. And it's not difficult. It just maybe takes a little longer.
So here are our linked notes, right?
Yep.
And when we add in I mean, part of the reason why I was failing before is we hadn't actually defined the variables that were coming through. And so we need to define those variables. So now we've defined the variables. And so what it's doing.
You don't need to read it. I mean, well, actually, you don't want to redefine V actually, because you've now redefined as empty. So this is a reason why I don't use the same name for inputs as I do for variables. I just use the name I've used for the input, and I tend to use a different prefix, which is a bit noddy. I mean, serious coders will laugh at my stupidity, but I sort of try to do it for the confused, for whom, you know, who aren't leaning on years of knowing how to do this. So I tend to use an I for it. Always just tells me, in the same way of using a descriptive name for a loop variable, that when you see it, you know what it is. So they're not all called X or Y or I or something, which is fine when you know and you're doing it deliberately. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But for a descriptive example, it helps to have things to sort of say what they are, because you've more chance of sort of reading the code and literally following it by eye through.
And so you're telling me I don't need to redefine that?
Well, no, because it's already and so one of the changes made at 9.5 was you can say, so an early problem with functions was everything arrived as a string. So if the string arrived that was actually a set, you had to say, right, the input I attribute is actually a set, and you declare a variable, pass the input into it to change the string containing semicolons into something that Tinderbox would understand as a set. That now happens. You can do that by basically when you define the function, you say the first argument is, as you've just said, there is a set, and the second argument is a string. This obviously will be blindingly obvious to those who do lots of coding, because you know that's an assumption. But obviously, taking it more from stepping up from very generic scripting, the reason is so you're telling Tinderbox what the ones and zeros in that little goblet of information are and what it expects them to be. So you're saying, you know, no, this is a list. Treat it as a list. I say, well, list lowercase l, i.e. a list or a set type.
Okay, so here you see me doing a little bit of debugging. So I'm saying, let's make the text equal to v set, and then let's make the text equal to v notes. And so when I do that, the v notes are the two the linked notes. So are the two entity notes, and the term notes are the notes that are linked. So that's exactly what we'd expect, right? And if we were to then get rid of this and get rid of that and just look at our set again, we see that this is our set. Okay, so we're good. And so we now know that's that, and then we can just go ahead and do this just to make it go plus. And then we can make this one to plus equals.
So just to explain what for those for whom it's unclear, what Michael's doing here is effectively dumping out a variable into the text of another note just to see what it is, because we're at a point in the code where we think we're doing the right thing, it's not having the right outcome. So one of the possibilities is that the variable value isn't what we think it is. So by dropping it out, in this case, logging it into a note, we're able to see what Tinderbox thinks it is. Because it's not the same thing. We have a different problem to solve.
So Tinderbox thinks vset is v learning management, v note taking, v Tinderbox, which it is.
Yeah.
Those labels there. And if we go here, whoops. Tinderbox thinks v linked notes is the entity notes, the term management, term note taking, term Tinderbox, which it is.
Yeah, but your Galaxy notes, the Galaxy notes already disappeared. So I think
because it's not there, it's not a linked note. Right. So if we now link Galaxy there, so we have Galaxy, and now we're going to delete this there. So now if we go down here, you'll see that Tinderbox is now going to see Galaxy as a linked note, which is what we expect.
Yeah.
So now what we're expecting is then to have linked notes minus v set be the unlinked note. And then we're going to ask it to unlink every note. And what it's doing is it's actually unlinking every term note. Not
so
just
look at
one.
v unlink. So what's the value of v unlink?
Okay.
So those are the things we think that's the list of things we think. Well, that's a list of things it might unlink. But bear in mind that when you come to the next stage, you're only going to link things using terms. So that doesn't matter at this point.
Right. And so now,
okay.
For whatever reason, it's now working.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but just stepping through that, it's now worked.
Yeah.
Now, if we go here and add Galaxy back in, see it's now at linked Galaxy. and now it's unlinked galaxy. Yeah, we're good.
So for your function, the last part of the bit is so you want to have more than one prefix. So in there, you need to know how many different types of
Yeah, and no, guys, unfortunately, hard stop.
Okay.
I have to leave. Would you like me
Right.
to email this file to you so you guys can continue with this conversation, or do you want to?
Yeah, you can email it. I mean, so you're going to leave the recording running on your.
I'll leave the
thing?
recording running, but I just got to go into this other call.
Okay, so I'll take over as Pat.
You want to crack on?
Okay, well, we got there, sort of.
Yeah. So why don't you guys figure out the let me find it. Modified unlinked notes, send to Mark Anderson. All right. Before I leave, just make sure you get this, Mark.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for solving my problem today. I hope you enjoyed this. And you wanted to make sure you got it before I disappear, Mark?
Okay, one moment. Where am I? Yep, got it.
All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye. And Mark, don't post this. I'll post it as part of the follow-up notes.
Yeah, sure.
And then email me back the final file when you got it.
Okay.
All right, everybody. See you later.
See you later.
So I won't try and dive into the last part now, but I think there are two possible ways that you could do the last part. So the next problem is that you may have Michael's using more than one type of other object. We've got terms, we've got entities, and other sort of thing, and each uses a different link type. If I recall, certainly with the links operator, the link type is actually a regex. So I think, but I don't know if it works with unlink. So what you could say is unlink term type. So you know this name or this name or this name, and you just you put them in as a regular expression. Another way is to know all the different types that you might want to check and remove. And one way probably to do that is to have another bit of code that stores a list somewhere that is the current types of link you have under management. If you're going down the complexity sort of rabbit hole of Michael's documents, because you write this function today and then next week you add a new type of object. So it's better that something makes that list up, and whenever the function looks as, oh right, I need to look for links. I need to go through and I need to unlink anything that may have this type of link type. So that's probably the neatest way to close it out. Any questions? Oh, Dave, tell me you understood all that.
Well, I watching Michael work is challenging. I mean, I keep wanting to yell, "Slow is smooth and smooth is fast." So.
No, I understand. I mean, and it's the sort of thing of, well, it's a difference when it's both that when you have some sense of what you're doing, but more to the point, what the problem is. It's
well,
much
I didn't know where to
faster.
look. I mean, he kept saying, "Okay, it's failed." I'm like, I didn't see a failure. I didn't know where to look. So
no, I understand, and I think one of the things that comes out of this is that something that needs to be done. And if Bruce was here, he would say at Bruce speed, which quite literally said, yeah. So this happened. Now look here, because you're quite right. Until you know where to look or where to check, it's not evident whether there is any feedback, especially as this is an application that doesn't sort of give you error messages like all over the place that says stop, read this, you've done a bad thing. It's nice it doesn't do that, but it also means that when something hasn't happened, you need to check ahead. Chuck.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of echo a little bit of what Dave was just saying, but from the perspective of what I find valuable in this type of exercise, and again, I understand it would be helpful if it slowed down a little bit, is that it's bringing to light approaches to using some tools that are fairly recent within the evolution of Tinderbox. And where something like unlink to and unlink from have some obvious conceptual ambiguities that I think you alluded to earlier. And this is the kind of thing that in any programming language I've ever fooled around with, or any of the variety of other systems, until you put your hands on it and play with it, the concepts don't register until you can really see the total action that results. And so I think this was a very useful exercise because it cleared up a few things that in reading aTbref or looking at some other documentation, I just had some now, which way are we doing this? And it also introduces the concept of link types, which is very important to some of the things I want to do.
Yep.
And so again, looking at all these things in context. Now, where I think the issue partly comes up is that Michael tends to jump directly into his framework of doing things. So he introduces that interesting little function, which we see glimpses of in the process. We only see the top part of it. And, there's a lot of useful insights in that part that when we then go and try and understand what he was trying to achieve, because we didn't fully see everything that was happening under the skin, it was a little bit more of a leap than the audience could handle in one pass.
Yeah, and we'd sort of smushed together.
Did I state that right, Dave?
No, that makes sense. Sorry, Dave.
No, I that's exactly right. I mean, and we've been here a long time, so I kind of knew what I would see looking under the hood when those notes automatically appeared about terms and things of that nature. And there are videos that show how to automate that function and put that in a prototype. It took a couple seconds to catch up and realize that was what was going on, because if you're not paying very close attention, it's all sleight of hand, so these meetings could become less productive and interminable if we had to keep going back to the beginning to say, so I'm wondering if there's a certain part of this meeting that we deal with people's individual issues, and in this case we were dealing with Michael's, but I'm wondering if there wouldn't be a standard Tinderbox file that we could use every week, that we would build and then we would use every week, that would illustrate a particular feature of Tinderbox, so that you would, by repetition, seeing essentially the same file, but here's this file in this view, and here it is in this view, and here it is in this view, and here's what it affords the user in each of these views, and here are the features and how they are manifested in each view, and so it's a standard file that examines a particular function or aspect of Tinderbox. That might be a longer term project.
No, I think that's very relevant. I mean, because funnily enough, I mean, it's something that might sort of been alluded to, but hyperbolic view is wonderfully getting a new lick of paint, and it's going to. So things like using link types will have a relevance, because you'll be able to sort of basically filter on a link type. The reason I say that is so link types, which have been around for a very long time and no one has used, because, well, effectively for a lot of people, it's the visual label you use in a map, which is cool and that's fine and it works if that's what you're doing. But it has a lot of really useful relevance. Actually, it's not something we discussed, but in Michael's rather powerful construct he has for writing reports. So things that are a term link, but they link using the term, I think it is. And that's good, because only links that are linking a term to something use the link type term. I mean, it's obvious after the fact, you think, well, why not just use a link? But it saves you having to find all sorts of other ways to filter out the things that you didn't want to look at. When you know you want a certain group of links, it's really useful. It's a bit like a prototype. You might have files dotted all over your Tinderbox. You know what they are, and it's really useful to say, oh, just give me the things that use prototype X, because I haven't got to say, well, I want the things that are under that, but they don't have this, and they're also not this, and they have that, which is what otherwise ends up happening. Again, in itself is another good message for using prototypes. Even if they do nothing else, then just allow you to identify a group of otherwise seemingly unconnected notes that you might want to address via a bit of action code or a query, because a query is actually these days, wasn't originally, but these days is action code. So that's useful. But yes, having a sort of reference note. I've sort of found this now for testing. I mean, one of the issues I have doing some beta testing at the moment is trying to work out what I use as a consistent test note, because you want something that's got more than not very much information and less than all the information, because the latter means it's overkill and you can't see the wood for the trees, and the former tends to be not enough to show the problem. So finding the sweet spot where you can say, right, I'll pull this and I'll take a fresh one out of the drawer and I'll try my test again. But I think this gets back to what you're raising, Dave. So we take a known entity, and if you don't understand what that is, you can go away and play with it, take it apart to your heart's content until okay, so this is the starting point at which I do these other things. Because certainly for some of these more complicated tasks, such as the ones we've looked at, complicated in the sense that not something you do on day one of using the application, it helps to have a sort of starting step where you can say, okay, right, so I have something that does sort of the following things. It's the thing that I've sort of learned along the way, probably needs a note in it to actually say in the document what some of those things are, because in your mind's eye, you always assume everyone knows, and the reality is they don't. Someone just send them the file, say, hey, take a look at this. And as I think we'll all know from, download somebody else's problem off the forum, thinking, well, crikey, it's very impressive, but I don't know what it does. And it can take you a while to just figure out
how I could, yeah. So, and I think the trouble with Tinderbox is such a versatile tool that it lends itself to a number of different use cases that are disparate, that have no relationship with one another. So whatever the test vehicle article would be, I think should be just an abstraction. It should be like Mimsy, where just Alice in Wonderland or something. So you don't get fixated on, okay, how do I make this into a calendar? You just want to show the features of Tinderbox, and not as it relates to your contact management, customer relationship management system, or your mind map, or your whatever. Just, here, I don't know. I think that might be something that we would do as a program over a period of weeks, is, start with a base file, examine all the dimensions of Tinderbox within that base file, show how you can expand it in baby steps.
I think one of the things I know from sitting the other side of that fence of making some of this stuff is that where that tends to get derailed is that you get about halfway down the line and about half the class at this point. So that's fine. But the example is now not using my domain perspective. And that's not because of being done, but there comes a point where, so for someone who's done lots of coding, it's probably self-evident and they can follow along. The less you've done of that, the more something drifts, in a sense, the general is great up to a point. And then I think for a lot of us, we need something that's closer to a we need a perspective where we have some trust that there is an endpoint and we understand what the endpoint is. Otherwise, certainly as you delve into functions, it's very easy for it to get very abstract, which becomes familiar with use. But the classic problem is, the first time round the boy, it's just incredibly confusing, and we don't know what does which, and what talks to what. And the more it's happening behind the screen. So when something is done in a function, you may know where the code lives, but it's less obvious. If I do something, if there's a rule, an on add, if I add a note into another note to make it a container or put something in a container, I know that the on add event fires. That's fairly easy to grok, I think. The more things sort of move behind the curtain, I I sort of know, well, I struggle to hold on to, because the more I do, the more familiar it becomes. And the difficulty is holding on to the point where you do something that actually needs a lot more explanation than you'd think, which is nothing to do with the task at hand, but it's all to do with the scene setting. So I'm absolutely sort of sort of happy with the point you make. Go, Chuck.
So extending on that, the value of working these things through is to have the community, which has the problem, the people who run into these issues, contribute to examples or problems that the community can work on that illuminate an area of interest within Tinderbox. So that takes me back to the forum, which is the primary vehicle for the community to begin to share things, and ask the question, should we have more topic areas in the forum? So as I was seeing Mark's presentation on posters, the first thing that cropped in my mind was, boy, we need a section of the forum just to talk about the various examples of interesting posters that people might want to develop within Tinderbox. And I can imagine that becoming a whole large branch, because when we start thinking about all the possibilities of bringing all these widgets in from the rest of the web universe, then it's fascinating and quite broad, but at the same time, all those examples will be very instructive to people who say, I've got another problem I want to try and solve, and a poster might solve it.
No, absolutely.
And I think same thing's true of links, by the way.
If functions were confusing, I think posters unwittingly will ramp it up, only because,
Right.
of course, the poster we want isn't the one that's absolutely simple.
Right.
And I tinkered around with, classic thing is I tried to make a poster of something, a little JavaScript thing I made, and it failed because actually what I'd forgotten is that the page was actually calling some local JavaScript, which it can do, but when you do as a poster, I was effectively breaking all sorts of security rules, which once I'd realized, I thought, okay, fine, I shouldn't have done that. But that's not something I'd expect most people to know. Indeed, I should know better after all these years, and I actually forgot because I was so focused on, I thought I was making a poster. Somewhere behind the curtain, I transgressed some rule that I do know about, but there wasn't the WebKit that part of things wasn't telling me that, and I don't think the answer is to have a welter of error messages. I think we'll find that. I mean, it's always the way that a new feature comes out, and as users we find cruel and unusual ways to torture it that were never envisaged at outset.
We have the interesting issue of JavaScript meets Tinderbox action code, and that's going to be an interesting path to go down.
Yes, and what goes where? But I mean, there are two levels to it. One is broadly, you're absolutely, as people are saying. I mean, I think the forum is the place to take this, because the sort of things we're talking about now aren't easy to solve live. If it's something where you're just moving a semicolon or something, that's fine. Trying to debug it live is complex and ultimately boring for a lot of people watching, because unless you are really close in understanding the problem, it's all just talk. So there's that we need to think about. It's interesting about forums. I was speaking as a forum moderator, so making another category, making another sort of sub forum is not problematic. In a sense, luckily the forum is small enough that those who are engaged, myself included, read all the posts anyway. But I suspect, actually, funnily enough, I think when posters, finally heaves into public view, it might be something that we want to park, not least for the reason you sort of mentioned, where it's an opportunity for people to say, the thing I'm actually interested in is the poster, not how it works, and what I'm trying to do is this, which gives us a bounded space in which to say either yes, and here's one that works, or no, don't do this, step away now, don't ever try this again because it's not quite what you thought it to be. And and one can explain why, without it getting lost in the more general thing. I mean, certainly in terms of, I think the forum is also useful for debugging stuff, because I find that often someone will arrive with a problem which we solve in the course of the thread, But what's interesting is there is invariably a wider pattern. And certainly when I sort of do, if I post a Tinderbox as a result, I try to do it by generalizing in the sense that, yeah, this solves your problem. But actually what we're also doing is we've discovered we can do this thing, which someone who is not a novice, but someone who's reasonably familiar with Tinderbox ought to be able to say, oh right, I can use that. You know, change the names of the template. Sorry, change the names of the attributes, and I can just, you know, I can copy paste that. We you know, in other words, saving what otherwise happens is someone said that's fine, it works beautifully, but my problem is very simple, very similar, but it uses different terminology, and that happens along the way, and it's expected, but ideally. And I think we got better at that in the forum, is sort of generalizing the answer such that it not only answers the question that somebody asked, but allows other people to see how they can take that and apply it in their different domain. Because I don't know, I think it was sort of Dave said, but I thoroughly agree with the thing that, you know, people do very, very different things. And the people who are doing whatever they do without problem are not those who turn up in the forum, as it happens. So, you know, we normally, and be it Tinderbox or anything else, you normally go to a forum either because you've got a problem or because you're you know, trying to learn a bit. And by and large, you know, most people are turning up, or they turn up for the first time with a problem that's been bugging them for hours, and they're angry, and they know that it's not their fault. That's where we are. You know, that's how we interact with our computers. So that's fine, and you know, we can resolve those. But I'm certainly open. I don't see any problem with adding extra sort of categories into the forum if need be,
Well,
as long as people find them.
I think one of the reasons why that might be helpful, and I think posters would be the place to try it out, is that, as you said, after a while, people begin to see some patterns. If you have a focused area on the forum where people who are interested in, for example, posters, bump up against a bunch of issues, somebody in that forum is likely to say, hey, we're seeing a common thread here.
Yeah.
Here's something you should do to make this work better, or here's something to avoid doing if you want it to work right. And then those kinds of posts will become very valuable. But if you just leave it in the morass of all the other things going on, I think, first of all, it's going to be confusing and distracting to people who are just trying to get familiar with Tinderbox.
Yeah.
And secondly, it won't encourage the kind of behavior that would be more focused on, we're trying to improve posters as opposed to, or the value of posters as a capability within Tinderbox, as opposed to the broader issues of everything else that Tinderbox does.
No, I agree. And obviously, but I won't be putting that in until until they emerge into the light of day, which according to a recent meetup is real soon now. So we'll
exactly,
you know, we'll see. But that, no, I'd agree. And giving people, you know, something that's closer to their problem is, I think, is also useful, because the sort of, in a sense, most things end up in the getting started box.
Well, along those lines, I found that linking is a very powerful capability in Tinderbox that, again, is a little bit hard to get your hands around, because, you know, the tools have been changing, the capabilities have been changing in recent time, and interpreting what some of the functions do really requires some good examples that you can play with.
Yes.
And what I'm also seeing is now we've suddenly got an improved form of the new mapping scheme. I'm not blanking right now. The hyperbolic view. Thank you. And that's going to suddenly put more emphasis on the value of links and link types. And so again, separating that out and making that visible category might be very helpful, because it will focus attention. It will allow for more discussion about the role between links and hyperbolic maps, and will create some new insights for people trying to make use of links as to why link types would be valuable and the things you can do with link types.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, yes, you know, exactly. So it's a bigger step than in a way than one thinks. The difference between, you know, dragging a line on a map and thinking, oh, well, I'll call it, I'll pick something out of the list, as opposed to, adding a deliberate link type. Well, this goes back to the early days of hypertext, though it has to be said that, was it Randy Triggs, one of the first PhDs in hypertext, who worked out that there were, I think, 157, a very exact number, of link types you might use in argumentation, at which point everyone threw their wax pencils in the air and said, I'm not doing this anymore, it's too complicated. and there's but between those extremes, I mean, at the time people were trying to do argumentation, that was AI version 1, version 2, I forget, but the world has moved on. But I totally agree. I mean, I use link types quite a lot, if only that I know that this bunch of links are not this bunch of links. So just it's another way of having prototypes for your links, is another way to think about it.
Right.
Because, and in a visual sense too, because you can have, it's probably something people don't play with, but you for any given link type, you can change the subtle parts. The main thing you might do is probably change the color of the link type. So you have blue links and red links or something.
So Mark, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You've made the point a couple of times that there's an analogy between prototypes and link types. Is that documented anywhere?
No,
I suspect it is, but that again is a kind of insight that's worth bringing out, with the caveat that, of course, somebody has to understand what a prototype is before they can understand that a link type is like a prototype.
Yeah, I'm afraid, no, that was like, Professor Dumbledore, that was just drawn from my mind
right.
in the moment that yes, there is no formalism there. It rather, it falls out from the fact that all links that are of a given type are certainly styled in that way. The greater point being, so here's the point. For instance, you can have basic links that run node to node, and you have text links that run node to node. A lot of people use text links because if you started in the sort of wiki PKM space, you probably don't know any other way to make a link, because the only way you make a link is by putting putting wiki style square brackets around it. And there's something wrong with that. But Tinderbox doesn't need you to do that. So in other words, you don't have to have a link anchor. So light map use, which I do quite a lot for initial sort of thinking through a problem. I never get around to writing any text. I hardly even invest too much energy in the name of the note. It's mainly, I know this note is not that note, these are related, those aren't. What I'm trying to do is put my hands around the problem. You can go, and then you can always go back and make that all tidy and put all sorts of stuff in behind it. But things like having different link types is quite useful, in the way that having different prototypes is useful, or having different shapes. Something that you can immediately.
Right. I think the point I was trying to make was not so much to go down the what do you do with link types, but to point out that one of the things that I think would be helpful to people coming up to speed on Tinderbox would be to have more of these observations that are analogies to things that people already know, perhaps outside of Tinderbox, or things they've already might have learned about Tinderbox, that this is a concept that has been extended from prototypes, and we see a similar capability with link types. I think people might find observations like that extremely valuable. And I think because of the broad capabilities of Tinderbox, we tend to confuse newcomers, or even people who've been using for quite a while who are trying to do something new and more expanded with it, that they don't have a place to gain a foothold. There's no mental navigation as to how to proceed. And I think some of the observations that you and others have made would be very helpful if they could be brought out in a more direct and obvious way.
So I think
I hate to use the term hence, but maybe if we had a hence section in the forum that just said, here's some ways of thinking about things, and don't try and get into fancy examples or anything like that, but just here's some observations that people may find useful.
Yeah, no, I
starting with Tinderbox is nothing but a list of attributes.
Yes, it's attributes all the way down. Well, it's notes and then it's attributes all the way down. But no,
Attributes all
you're
the way
right.
down. Yes, I love it.
I think what you're pointing to is, so one of the some of those are most easily framed in the think of saying, you know, why use a prototype? Why? It's basically what is it? And then you get lost in the explanation and say, well, you know, why? You know, it says what multiply? Why bother to use a link type?
Yeah.
So that sort of, because that sort of presupposes, okay, what we're going to talk about, so you know what a link is. If not, you're probably going to go away and read about a little bit or ask about links first, because otherwise the question doesn't make sense. So having off that small modicum of knowledge, it enables you to say, okay, well, so the thing is, if you're using a link or if you're using a sort of note, you may encounter this sort of problem. And this is how a prototype or a link type or other sort of things can actually help you move through that, because the joy of Tinderbox is this sort of, you know, emergent structure, which a lot of tools just don't allow. I mean, I was describing it the other day. It's like Lego before they had figures and sort of, you know, bits that looked like things other than Lego blocks. You know, before you just had to make it using your imagination. And, you know, if you didn't have a people-shaped block, well, you know, your world had not ended. You just imagined it was. And, you know, perhaps where a lot of us are starting is we're actually starting with modern Lego, where we're expecting there to be, you know, figurines and wheels and things. And it's a bit weird when you've actually got to, you know, just say, no, that square thing over there is a wheel. Just roll with it, you know. It'll stop hurting after a while. So there's something, I think there's also something to be explored there.
Well, that's
sorry, Dave, go ahead.
Well, once you start printing, you know, the Exxon sign on a Lego brick, then you constrain it. You know, it's as we create these more specific representations, then the imaginative capacity diminishes on it. So that's the wonderful thing about Tinderbox, is it's just largely a blank slate. But we've never explored, I think, to my knowledge, since I've been attending these things, chart view. I think we looked at tree map view, but I have no idea. I can't recall what value tree map view has. I suspect it may have some value, but, you know, we've never really explored some of these things. Timeline view, I think, intuitively, I understand timeline view might be very valuable, but I also understand timeline is perhaps not Tinderbox's forte, that there are applications that do timelines much better.
I think the problem is that
we should explore some of these other features that we've neglected for a long time or haven't explored because they're not as links of the new hotness because of Rome and the graph and all that stuff. But there are other ways of looking at things that I don't think get as much attention, not because they're not as useful, but
yeah, and the graph only tells you what you linked, which I keep reminding people. You know, you're forgetting about all the dark matter. What is it that stops these things being linked? And that's how it's important. You know, and that is the lovely thing actually about having something like a map as a sort of thinking space, because, you know, what isn't there is in a sense as important as what is there. All you're doing is you're slowly adumbrating the things that you think you have an understanding of. And
it's the abyss, Mark. It's the abyss, and once you start
very quickly. I mean, tree map, the reason tree map just basically draws a box. It's the outline drawn as a set of Russian dolls. So if a container has 3 items, the 3 items inside that box each contain 1/3 of the box. That's classically how it's made. The fun starts is that you can actually control what the size of the different things. You could say, oh, it's down to the number of links it has. And the thing is, it's one of those sort of things. It's hard to. I haven't found a compelling example. I mean, I know because I've sort of seen it and I can imagine it, and I play with it in other areas. But I haven't yet found a really good sort of demo file for that makes me think, okay, here's something I can show someone who's never seen the tree map before as to why they might want to use it.
What was the Nakatomi view or whatever? The Naka, there was a
Oh,
view
well, that's been swept away by the by the passage of time. That was a so that was something to do with the way that you assembled notes for export in Tinderbox 5. So that has gone. As regards timeline view, and the comment was made that, well, you know, that maybe it's not so great. It's fine. What it's not trying to be, it's not trying to be something like Aeon timeline. It's not trying to make a pretty timeline. It's trying to help you basically do a time-based map, essentially. I think that's a better way to look at it. And it's in our nature that what we want is we want prettiness and ordinariness. So we tend to get hung up on colors and shapes and all these other affordances, which are fine. But if you're doing that at the outset, when you don't know what the structure is, the other problem is I know from having some years tinkering around with timelines in various forms for other work, is that real world data is incredibly lumpy. Pretty much any demo you see of a timeline is useless because it's all beautifully spaced out, and that's just not how it occurs. So I think, as with maps, I'd say embrace messiness. But if you want to see the transition, I mean, I think where timeline gets used, places I recall it being used, are people, legal folk who are looking at sort of case law, who are trying to say deal with a complex case. You know, which thing came before which other things. Something else flew through my mind, and it's gone went out the other side. So it's another great. But you know, it's the kind of thing. If you need it, you need it. The great thing about all these views is you don't need them. You don't need them until you need them. They're all there. And if you embrace them as just being different visualizations of the same information, so it really doesn't matter. If you decided you're going to sit down and start your massive project as a tree map, those notes are still available as a map a year later. So I wouldn't worry unduly if you haven't found a use for something. It's not because you don't necessarily know how it works. It's possibly because you don't have a need for it. I mean, right. Chart view is fine. I personally found in the early days, the problem is chart view is just woefully wasteful of space for what is essentially an outline. Though chart will allow you to do, you can draw it, you can rotate it and effectively have it drawing from the top downwards. So you can have like an org chart. So if you're trying to do something like a family tree, but you probably don't want to do that because you can't draw link lines in a chart, which is going to be the next, sure as night follows day, that's the first thing you're going to want to do. So, well, Aunt Eloise is actually related to Uncle Frank who's over there. And I can't do that. So, but it does allow that decompositional structure, and then that should allow you to see that tree map's just another way of drawing the same thing. They all broadly draw. There are almost three types of views. I suppose timeline's another one, but things like tree map, chart, and outline are essentially all the same sort of things drawn a slightly different way. Map, as we know, is one contained, but it's a map. Hyperbolic view is a sort of different sort of map, but drawn at document scope, but only using linked notes. And then you've got things like crosstabs and attribute view, which are essentially reports. So they're quite different, although obviously they draw off the same notes. So they're doing different things. And another thing that is worth sort of bearing in mind is that more recent views are beginning to put the controls in the view. So if you open up attribute browser, there's a bit at the top where you can play with various controls and it affects what you see. Most of those controls, especially in outline and map, are all just attributes. The change makes sense. What it does mean is it's sometimes harder to figure out where that's stored, which is a good reason, because we're over time now, is to think about for a future talk, is to circle back around and talk about the tab gallery. the main point of the tab gallery is that if you've not by deliberate intent and until the moment you've closed it by mistake, so you realize you spent 6 months producing this beautifully customized view. If you save it into the gallery, basically what you're saving is the sort of visualization as seen from a view perspective.
Yeah, I think we should probably at some point. I love having the guests; those are great, and I love. But I think exploring some of these other topics we've just mentioned, rather than getting down into the nitty gritty of how to code action code.
Sure. Yeah, it's terribly easy to go down the automation rabbit hole. That sort of.
It's very exciting for the people who can do that with some facility. It's very exciting and rewarding for them. For those of us who are perhaps less gifted in that regard, there are some other features that we're perhaps not exploring simply because we don't know about them, or it doesn't occur to us to use them. Like I'm using, like I mentioned, I'm using map view for the first time and stumbling my way through that. And I do see some utility. It affords me some freedom in conceptualizing things that doesn't exist as easily in an outline, as readily. More friction.
And things don't have to all line up.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. With an outline, you got to figure out where everything goes first, and so yeah, I just don't know that we need to see another. And we're recording this, I should probably, but these speed programming things are just, they are. I don't know that they help.
No, that's fine. I mean, we were slightly sort of slightly mixed thing because we started up, effectively dealing with a problem. It happened to be
right. We had no agenda.
But, I mean, essentially what we're doing there, and it happened to be an automation problem. But no, I do think, I certainly think there's scope to go back and just look in very slow time, deliberate slow time at some of the views. Kick the tire and say, well, why on earth would you use this?
Right.
And although not everyone has to, I think it helps. One of the things I do say to people is, well, just occasionally open one of the other views, and even if all it does is say, I will never need this ever again, that's fine. That's good, because you've learned something. But you may find, actually, this is quite useful. I hadn't realized I could do stuff, say, in the timeline, because
that's where
my information
you need that initial bit of traction, that initial bit of success that kind of gives you some insight into yes or no. I mean, when you just look at it and go, I don't even know, where to start, and you just leave it aside and never to return.
Well, part of the problem is I think we're unintentionally addicted to process, because what we really want is the outcome. We are naturally lazy, and we just I don't want to know how it's made. I just want one. But what we say is we'd like to understand how it's made, but what we mean is we don't want to understand how it's made. We just want it to work in the way that we've imagined and which we're struggling to explain, which is where the fun comes in, because it's rather hard. It's rather hard if you haven't got that shared thing, which is why, I mean, I just put the usual signal up that, in a sense, whether you're doing something in automation terms or you're just doing something very spatial, like in a map, actually just uploading a small demo file, which often, doesn't need to be many notes, that just gives a hint as to gives a sort of shareable sense of where you are and aren't. That's remarkably useful, because it gives us a common test vehicle, so that we know we can check we're on the same page, and we can actually begin to ferret out the unstated assumptions. So, it's often the case, somebody describes something, they upload a file, and say, oh, right, it wasn't that at all, it was something that's completely different. And that's fine, but you won't see that without seeing the file.
Right. Well, and that's where, again, I think we're losing everybody. But the map I'm working on, I'm a little reluctant to share right away, because the content is such that people's minds immediately go to other things other than the Tinderbox file.
That's all right. I memorably, there was one part of the old demo bank which started as a guy. It was his lectures as a pastor, or rabbi, should I say, on sort of Jewish approach to marriage and all these things. To make it easy, I went through and I bowdlerized. I just put stuff for all the sort of term. It still worked. It's a bit of a crazy read, but it worked, and you could still understand the thing. So the thing is, if you're worried about that, is don't worry. If you want to share a sort of problem thing, is what's more important. Although obviously to you as to anyone, the individual is that the words you're writing have meaning, but actually, if it's general, because often you might be wanting to talk about, well, how do I do stuff with shapes or something? Well, the shapes don't care what the note's called,
Right.
And so the thing is, if you're thinking, well, how would I share this with someone? Just take a step back and say, what am I trying to share?
Right.
And all the stuff I'm not trying to share isn't needed. You can just put ipsum lorem text in. If it needs some text, but the text you have is something you don't wish to share, you can just put context in. It really doesn't matter, especially if you're not trying to do searches on the text.
Right. The demo version of Tinderbox can handle an unlimited or a fairly large. The demo to read only.
It will read a file. It just limits you to making
25.
10 new notes. I think it's 10 new notes per session. So if you were the sort of person who,
Well, no, I'm
wants
just
to
thinking
keep
that-
starting after 10 notes. But the point is, if you want to do it with a friend, or I think you were talking about family members or something when we were discussing offline. You can, with a demo, you can take a file that somebody's made and you can look at it. The main thing you can't do is you can't make more notes.
Right.
But doesn't that stop agents working? I may be wrong.
But that was the thing. That was just that it is a Tinderbox file. You can share it with others. You give them a demo copy of Tinderbox, and then they can explore, click around in it, and make of it what they want in terms of reading.
I just noticed who's aware of it. I'm just going to check. Tom, Phil, Art,
They're not there. They're not really there.
anything from the wings before I suggest we all call it a day.
They're all digital phantoms.
Well, that's fine, but I don't.
My brain is completely buzzed, and anyway, I'm dealing with it's 11:30 at night. I'm dealing with something halfway across the world. No mental energy left. But I support what you guys are talking about. It does, but then, it's always been that same issue. We can never really come to the balance between people coming in with problems that can effectively be solved within a 45-minute attention span of a meetup. And, then everyone needs their coffee and their dogs. And so there's a very fine balance here. I think we're trying. I guess we try and we nudge it from time to time. But yes, of course, if only Tinderbox would stop coming up with new terms, at least I could learn the old ones.
Well, watch this space. There's more coming down the pike soon. So
that's why I think posters are going to suck all the oxygen out of the community for a little while. I think. In the meetup.
I like the fact that I can put graphics in now, at least more easily with the posters. Really.
Well, the good thing about posters is, for once, it won't be people moaning about why isn't Tinderbox like latest thing we just looked at. So it's like, I see a hand, Phil. Far away.
So I just want to support the idea that, maybe we put together as a community a list of topics. We've got speakers coming in. When we don't have speakers coming in, not only just like the different graphs, but back to the basics with agents. What can you do with agents? We keep talking about links, and I keep thinking a lot of these things would emerge with agents, which is I use much more heavily. So maybe having some discussion about that and the power of agents, both to find what is there and what isn't there. I actually use them to find notes that don't contain terms.
Yeah, I think a useful thing, probably useful suggestions that people can make, is to sort of take a broad topic like agents, give it but give it a context that isn't massively domain specific. Like it's not, detecting the next protein molecules, so it's not in any particular area, but just sort of saying, but the aspect, the reason we're looking at. So what I'd like to understand is, can agents basically control linking, for sake of argument? That could create quite a bounded. I think that could create quite a nicely bounded demo. So I think the thing is, So the problem otherwise is we end up saying what we'll do tree maps this week, and we sort of plod through. We flip all the switches. But I know that's not actually particularly compelling. It's sort of, you need some sort of context to make the light bulb go off. So you can say, although I'm not doing what's being demonstrated, I'm doing something close enough to it that I can see that I can either go and do it, or I know the question I need to ask. And it doesn't matter which of those are both, well, one is self-serving, and the other one is easily sorted out in the context of the forum or side conversation, whatever.
Actually, it just struck me, it might not be such a bad idea for us to actually take one topic and then do 2 or 3 or 4 consecutive meetups on it, because we tend to fragment, and it's so complex and big, and then people have questions and can come back next week, and we can sort of develop. It's like going to school,
Yeah.
If you went to school in first grade and like every day you had a new subject, you probably get blown out of water.
Nobody does their homework.
Yeah, there's that.
Well,
I
yes,
have to
yeah.
find the weak spot in what I was saying.
It's that moment of silence when you ask, right, has everyone done the worksheet we issued? No. But I don't think that matters. I mean, I do know. I mean, I can say I've discussed it, I've actually proved it. I mean, trying to write worked examples actually is a massive amount of work, especially if you want interstitial stages. Because it's very difficult to go back, and if you forget to capture a stage, it's quite hard work if you've gone beyond that to go back, remember, I need to roll back the file to when I didn't have all this, or what normally means you have to go back to the last saved version and then redo all the work. But then again, I think the sweet spot for that is saying, no, what I'm trying to understand is this view or this feature in the context of 1 or 2 other things. So not necessarily a domain of expertise, but a task. I have this thing, I want to use it to do generically to do this thing. I've seen somebody do it, but I don't understand how it's done. And also that I think skirts us around the thing about getting into pointless arguments over process about whether we're doing it exactly the right way, which of course is just a way to lose a lot of time and get very upset, because that doesn't really matter as long as you get the outcome. And especially with a tool that's so open to incremental formalization, there's normally 3 or 4 ways to do it, and it doesn't really matter which you do. You're not going to worry about the exact implementation in lesson until you start pressing really, really hard on some aspect of it. And frankly, that's very few of the people who are using it.
Yeah, but even so, tree maps we didn't invent for Tinderbox. There's a reason tree maps exist. Even somebody saying this is how they're used might give people ideas of why it's in Tinderbox, or give us a history of why he put it in Tinderbox. Who asked for it? I'm sure that's usually how.
It's another Ben Schneiderman's idea. It came out of his lab in Maryland. They were the people. They were the people who came out with the blue link for the web and all sorts of other interesting things, and some of the early haptic interfaces from that lab. But another simple case for a tree map is that if you say you had an outline that might be your organization, for sake of example, if everything in it or all the components of some system that you're looking at, the size of the box in the tree map could be the dollar cost of the component. And what you'd instantly see is, lo and behold, as tends to be the case, the thing that you hadn't thought about is a massive box, buried way down in the structure in a way that you would miss it. So it can do emergent things like that. So it's one of those things that you can ask it the right question. I'll show you something really interesting. Otherwise, it's a rather workaday feature.
Yeah, I've seen it used for disk space.
Yes. Yep. That's a classic example. Because it online it tends to merge into coding stuff. Or you'll see things like some of the lines of code in a certain feature, and you see these enormous trees. But if you see that, look beyond it. Just think of it. Basically it's a number relating to each object. It's an outline where each object has a size relating to a number. but that number can be all sorts of things. That's the cool part. It isn't just, whether the number of siblings divided by the number, the number of siblings sort of, divided across the box, which is normally the default position because you have to start with something.
Wonder, play with that with sentiment analysis.
It's
Size of the box depending on how negative or positive it is.
Well, good luck
This
with
is-
that. Yeah.
This has been fun. I gotta go.
Okay.
It's been fun.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I'm gonna drop off now, and Michael will wrap this up anyway. Okay. Well, thanks. It's been fun. See you all next week, perhaps.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Oh,